Another draft physics video presentation. Just the snarky commenters, I guess, today. And such. Pile of them. It's probably just the same person. Oh, Anyway, this is the best they can do. So again, I know you can't really measure a whole organization based on, like just because a few priests, molest children, it doesn't mean that, Catholicism is bullshit. But it does give you a slight indication of a problem. When the leaders can't even really believe, they believe they can't, screw somebody else's wife, but they can screw their children. Yeah, that's okay. Jesus likes that. Anyway, just, all right. So this is, just a measure of the credibility of the opposition, is that they can't do better than this in terms of framing an argument. They can't do it in a more honest or straight up kind of manly way. They have to do it in this little sissy, mudslinging coward way. All right. Lying and all that stuff. Just, if you have to lie to make your argument, it's kind of lame. All right, I'm your number one fan, Gary. Yeah, well, we don't really believe that. To heck with these guys who say, you're full of crap. You're not full of crap. And they can't say the word crap. He's scared to type it. Your theory is testable. Yes, it really is. And so is yours, frankly. They could swing a weight over the LIGO mirror and show us how frickin' sensitive it is, right? It's not even complicated. Somebody could jump up and down on the tube, and show us all how sensitive it is. It really isn't that hard to have a couple little tests that say, oh, gee, look at that. It picked up that little tiny bit of movement. Oh, amazing. Yeah, they could do that anytime. They could test their theory. Anytime they could redo the Eddington experiment from space and show us lensing outside of the sun's corona. We don't have a single experiment, really. There's not a single one where they can demonstrate that they've seen a photon being bent outside of the sun's corona. No image of that. Nothing. No evidence that ever happened, ever. Okay, and it should, by Einstein's own theory. Okay, his unfalsifiable magic bent space theory, for which there's no way to, I can't say the magical bent space fairies don't exist. And the whole point of a theory is to meet the evidence without contradiction. And that's your only obligation, is to satisfy it with an explanation that seems plausible. Okay, and your explanation is bent space fairies do one thing in the universe, and then the virtual photon pixies do the rest. And then you have some gremlins thrown in for fun. The magnetic gremlins. Yours is the unfalsifiable theory. Yours is the one that has no evidence. If this shit really happened, it should be happening all over the place, like gravitational lensing. Should be in all kinds of places, and it's not there. The places we know, there's lots of gravity, no lensing. Yours is this thing full of contradictions. You say it's wave-like behavior in the slit experiments, yet the single slit doesn't behave like water waves, and the multi-slit doesn't behave like water waves. And guess what? The double slit doesn't either, if you really look at it, because there's two patterns. And you can't explain where the other pattern comes from at all. You have no clue. Your little pixies don't explain it. Yours is the unfalsifiable pile of crap for which you have no evidence. And you have huge inconsistencies. And then you lie about the evidence and talk, oh yeah, well, we did these detector experiments and the light just goes straight through and makes a clump. Even though it's clearly a single slit, and single slits clearly create the same interference pattern. So you just lie. You lie about experiments you don't do. You lie about the results. You lie about how perfect the math fits when it doesn't fit that perfectly. So, yeah, right. Okay, so. Useless comment. No arguments made. No counter arguments to the arguments I've made. Okay, can someone tell me how to set up an avatar? There's no avatars on YouTube. They're called icons. Okay, I don't have an avatar, so I'm just going to delete this whole thread because it's really just a waste of time. So, fuck off, meatwad. All right, so this is Frylock, which is just another name for meatwad. Have you ever tested your theory? I test it by it explaining the experiments that have been done over the last 500 years. It explains the results of the experiments. That's my obligation. I don't have to explain anything else. 10,000 years ago, somebody could have said, I have a theory that all this stuff evolves, because you can see, like, when, I fuck bitches, they look a little bit like me, and they look a little like the bitch, the kids. And somebody else did it, it comes out different. And so clearly there's this connection, and clearly, whatever my essence is that's bleeding into the new little monster, that would mean that, depending on how we function in our lives and how many bitches we screw, that's going to decide what we look like as a group. Okay, and that's like evolution. Now, somebody could add a theory, right? They got nothing, but it fits the evidence, the theory. It makes sense. Okay, something about you changes a little bit with each version, and it's connected to, the people who made you, the two, and you could just see the lineage going backwards and say, originally we're all the same thing, but we diverted. Yeah, there, evolution. You don't need anything complex to say, here's a theory that fits what we see in the world. You can't provide a whole bunch of evidence, but you don't have experiments. Now, obviously, photons are really hard to videotape. It's just a fact. So the evidence is going to have to be a little bit indirect, and we're all stuck with that. And here these assholes are arguing as if they have some sort of direct, and they have the videotape of the photons. They even do that, right? Oh, we took a picture of a black hole, and it's not a picture, right? I mean, it's not even close to something you can call a picture. Anyway, with any kind of credulity. So, all right, anyway, I was thinking you could set up a laser point, point it at a target about a quarter mile away and measure the displacement over the day. Yes, I think you could probably do something like that. But I don't have that. Like, you have the laser technology, fine. So let's just understand that lasers diverge. That is, they make giant spots. So when they reflect light off the moon, they only get back one out of a million of the photons. 1 out of a billion, I think it actually is, out of the photons they send. And why is that? Well, because the laser diverges across the whole trip to the moon and actually covers a gigantic, mile radius kind of circle. So when you shine a laser at the moon, you're hitting a mile of the moon. And the little target's a tiny piece of that. And so only those little photons come back. So that's the liability of lasers. Is frankly, we don't have the technology yet to make one that doesn't diverge. But I'm sure the best laser made probably doesn't diverge much, right? Maybe. I don't know. Do you know? But you're expecting me to do this pretty important experiment, right? I mean, they have the LIGO tube. Why don't they use it and do this? I mean, you can ask these questions. I can keep asking you the question. So why don't, if you're going to bother making a 2-mile long tube, why don't you use it for some other experiments? And is there any evidence they have? No. Is that my fault? No. Amazing fucktard. All right, a mile away and measure the displacement over the day. If you're correct, the laser should make an ellipse pattern. So again, he says, if I'm correct, that's what should happen. So he's telling me what my theory predicts, which is horseshit. As I point out, the two things are both moving, which is a problem. The emitter, okay, so you're shooting your laser from the same medium on Earth. They're connected by the same thing, so they're moving together. So wherever it's going, they're going there together. Now let's understand Einstein, in the spaceship analogy he used to defend doubling the amount of gravity that photons experience traveling on Earth, did so because of this rocket ship example. You create a velocity, in a direction, and the light beam, as it travels, right? The idea is that the surface moves as it's traveling, and therefore the beam hits a wrong location on the ship. Right, you can see that well enough. Okay. Now, part of the problem is that as I've explained, and as their own theory acknowledges, a photon has a ray length. Okay, there's more to a photon than just this. Okay, you couldn't call that. If I make one of these, that's not a photon, and they know it, right? They're not denying that the photon has to have a length to it. If you don't have enough of this thing, you don't see it. Frogs can see smaller ones, but humans need big ones. Fact. Okay, so their theory has the same kind of problem. If their wave theory is correct, they got the same kind of problem in the sense that this thing is going to be created over a surface. So let's understand that the first bit will be fired from the surface when it's in this location. You could argue the first node. And then the next node is going to be fired at a different location. And the next node's at a different location. The next node's at a different location. So what you're doing is you're radically increasing the separation between the alignment of the photon. So the photon can't possibly travel its normal straight line path because it's not being created in a straight line path. It's moving. Okay, and the target's moving likewise. So the end result is there'll be a certain place on the target where the photon will hit, but it's going to hit with a much wider spread. So if it had any polarization, that is, if there was any difference in the positions of the photons, in space. Let me just get rid of this. The displacement here is polarization, right? So that could be agreed on. The problem is that this wave was produced theoretically by the surface over thousands of atoms. So you have 2,000 atoms worth of polarization, okay? 2,000 atoms. So over the surface of 2,000 atoms is where this wave was generated in the first place. And that's how it's going to land, is on a section of space. So you're just going to radically increase the amount of polarization. So you're probably not going to be able to receive the light anyway, because technically it's now going to be spread over a much larger area than the crystal of the material that it has to hit. So you got lots of liabilities, but the real big one is, like I said, is the laser beam spreads as it travels across the distance. The little photons are not coming out in some perfectly straight lines that make it possible for you to say, oh, here's a little spot, how much did a little spot move? Now the spot gets gigantic with time. And now the difference, measuring the difference on this huge circumference versus this tiny circumference, is a gigantic liability. It's like me making the argument that the center of the sun's gravity is processing. The center of the sun's mass processes. You don't see it out here. It's happening in here. Okay, and the same thing is probably true for the Earth. The center of the Earth, the gravitational mass is in any one moment not the same in all directions because of that procession, that movement. But you don't see it in the outside of the Earth. So what else do I have to say here? So anyway, so it was whole Einstein's argument that the photon would appear to land on a surface, okay, below what you would expect because the surface is moving. So the target's here. It can't hit the target because the target's moving away from the photon. And the point is it's moving away from each bit of the photon. So, with each bit, the same displacement would be taking place based on gravity. So you would have what would look like, you could draw it as an arc, but the point is you're missing the target. And that's a real movement. It's a real problem, Einstein acknowledged. But I'm just saying it's such a small amount of displacement, you need a very precise instrument to be able to detect it. You're certainly not going to do it with a handheld laser. So, but I'm all for doing experiments. The more the merrier. And the question to be asked is why, with all these billions of dollars to spend on science and understanding the next vaporous particle that only exists for a zillionth of a second, instead of spending billions of dollars to learn that, why don't they spend some money to learn these kind of facts? So anyway, another thing about the photons, like I said, their theory has the same liability. But let's understand what their theory is, okay? What they're claiming to be some proven bit of knowledge. All right, so their wave is this gigantic thing. Let's understand, it's gigantic. Okay, it's being emitted by 2,000 atoms worth of displacement. So over a surface of 2,000 atoms, it's oscillating. And yet they're going to tell you that it doesn't hit one atom over here. Okay, that's 1/2000th of this size. No, it hits the electron right here, which is 1,000,000 times smaller than the atom. Okay, so it's like 2,000,000 times smaller than the width of the wave. The object, they say the whole wave hits this little electron and wobbles it. So this specific electron gets all of the energy from this entire wave, goes into just that electron. Not this electron, not that electron, not this one, not this one, not this one, not any of those. No, just this one. Is that plausible? Does that make any sense at all? And then if I'm moving this surface at the speed, half the speed of light, is it plausible that all this wave could hit that one electron? I don't think so. So, I mean, this is such a stupid argument for somebody to make, this falsifiability argument, in the circumstance where we're all stuck with, indirect circumstantial evidence. That's all there is. There isn't anything better. It'd be really nice if we have videotapes of every crime that ever took place in the history of mankind, every act, everything, but we don't. And so sometimes you have to reconstruct it logically. And what does logic say? Are there contradictions in their theory? Do they say it does this, and then in another circumstance they say it does something different? Okay, those are the kind of things you're looking for. And they're the one with the theory where bent space makes planets move, even though we know it's a nuclear force, because I can take a tiny atom and just put it right outside the Earth's atmosphere, and it'll move exactly in the same gravitational orbit, because it's going exactly the same velocity. So velocity is all that really matters. Lots of evidence for what's causing movement. Yet, so they have bent space is the theory for the big universe, and then they have this weird quantum mechanics crap for the small universe that's dependent on something called a virtual photon that somehow magically tells things to come towards me or go away from me. Somehow it magically can convey the information. It doesn't make it happen by forcing it, by hitting it with velocity or momentum. No, it tells it with some sort of language. It says, hey, you have to move towards the sun. Why? Because I say so. That's their theory. There isn't anything else to it. I can't give you any more details to critique because they don't have any details for how their theory functions. They just tell you the little magical things do it. The bent space, the virtual photon, the dark energy, the dark matter, the entangled little special ESP particles. I mean, their whole theory is a fable, made of no real, continuous, reasonable theory of function. They're all different little pixies. All right. And yet they'll sit there and point their finger and say, your theory's too unfalsifiable. It doesn't mean anything. All theories, to some extent, until again you can create enough evidence, and these are obviously, gravity is mysterious. I mean, it's invisible. You don't get to see it doing it. So yeah, we're all stuck with bad evidence. Imperfect evidence, and you have to have enough integrity to go through the evidence, go through it logically. Like the God theory can sound pretty good, okay, but then you think about it for a minute, and what do you run into? You run into, well, it doesn't solve the creation problem, because how did God get created? I mean, how did it's not like you have some mechanism that proves gods. I mean, the argument is where did the stuff come from? How does something exist? It doesn't make any sense. And somehow it makes even less sense to say, though, well, something elemental, like a photon poofing into existence, is a lot easier than poofing gods into existence. And then you start thinking about, well, how could God exist forever? Wouldn't he get incredibly intelligent and all that kind of stuff? And instead he seems like a terrible boogeyman. He doesn't have any, he can't even get a decent copy of his book published. I mean, one that you'd really like to sign. I mean, do you really think God talks like an idiot? I mean, the Bible's incoherent, disconnected, mushy stories. It This is the narrative of the super intelligence of the universe. I mean, it's, so you can see the non-continuity, the stuff that just makes it obvious. Wrong theory. It doesn't go anywhere reasonable. And all of your nonsense of entangled particles and wavicles and magical ethers that don't really exist. They're fields and, whatever. And every single particle has its own little stretchy field. It doesn't have any continuity. It doesn't make any sense at all. All right. All right. Take, if you're correct, the laser should make an ellipse pattern. Yes, if we can make something we know is going to travel a straight path, and the problem is we just don't know what happens to emitters when you move them. Do atoms emit photons the same way when they're going half the speed of light as they do when they're going no speed? So you're just assuming. You're assuming that, yes, everything stays the same. Even though the atom's going the speed of light, it doesn't change shape. Nothing changes. Everything's exactly the same. I can't make that assumption. Anyway, take that, douchebags who claim your theory is untestable. So again, your theory is untestable. Where do I test the bent space? Oh, the nothing did it. Something that has the invisible man did it. Bent space is not an answer to anything. It doesn't explain a mechanism at all. It's just a magical placeholder for an answer. In the sense, what is it? What do you mean bent space? So an electron is sitting in space right now, and somehow it just senses there's a mass over here that it has to go to. It just senses it. It says, I'm going to go, and I'm going to just turn my little propellers on and shoot over there. Or does the space itself just disappear? So the electron doesn't even have to do any work at all. The space just magically going right between the electron and the other object, the space just disappears and it sucks into the vacuum of the empty, the non-existence of the non-existence. You made the nothing into nothing. I mean, a double vacuum. You have no mechanism, and yet you'll sit there and say you have an untestable theory. You have a completely unlabeled, unnuanced, undetailed. There's just you're just holding up nothing and saying, look, what? Look at what? What am I supposed to look at? You don't have a theory. Oh, this is amazing bullshit. All right. This user we do not need. All right, from Encyclopedia Britannica. Yes, I'm sure there's quotes from the Bible in Encyclopedia Britannica. Doesn't mean anything. So that is, what is that? Citation? No. I'll get it. Anyway, of falsifiability in the philosophy of science, a standard of citation? No, Criterion. Well, anyway, I know that word. Can't say it. The standard of evaluation of what is this? Putativity. I guess that's provability. Scientific theories, according to which a theory is generally scientific. Okay, only if it is possible in principle to establish that it is false. I just don't understand how a true theory could be established as being false in the first place. It just doesn't make any sense. So all you're saying is you can find an element that's inconsistent. Something doesn't make sense. Well, this wave thing hitting one electron doesn't make any sense. Clue. The wave being produced in the first place doesn't make any sense. Photons aren't stuck to each other. Doesn't make any sense. Okay, so you're out of luck. Anyway, according to which a theory is scientific only if it is possible in principle to establish that it is false. So again, this is Karl Popper. Who cares? Retard. Let's see. Proposed the criterion. Oh, that's it. Criterion. As a fundamental method of the empirical sciences. So this is just where, the snooties attempt to evade the obligation to prove or logically demonstrate something. So they don't want to have to argue with Christians, and they don't have to argue with people who say it could be or it could be. So they just want to close the door and say you're not allowed to speculate. So essentially, if I was 2,000 years ago and I speculated about evolution, I somehow am not allowed to do it because I can't prove it. So somehow I can't even offer a counter theory, okay? Because somehow I'm obligated to prove what they're not obligated to prove. I mean, again, the only thing we have is the evidence. So you have to cite the evidence. So if you're going to critique my theory, then cite where I don't describe the experiments that exist, where somehow I'm not accounting. So you sit there and tell me that LIGO detected gravitational waves. I simply point out that if you're going to claim you've measured half the distance of a proton in movement, well, why don't you use some other mechanism to move your mirror? Just swing a weight right over the tunnel. Okay, and let's see your little light blip on and off, and that'll tell us how sensitive your little instrument is. So why can't you meet those simple obligations to prove when you're making an extraordinary claim? You make an extraordinary claim that solar masses turn into bent space. Well, where's the theory for that? There wasn't an Einstein theory, so you can't just use the Einstein says so bullshit. Who says so? Joe Smo at LIGO? Apparently, that's all they had to do was just invent a whole new physics. The physics of converting mass into bent space. Not into Hawking radiation, not into light, not into any other form of radiation that we know of. No, into a whole new form of radiation. Bent space radiation. I mean, your theory is so bad. I mean, it's such a glass house argument. I mean, you're living in such... the glass is so thin. You could crack holes in it by just a little bit of breath. Okay. So British philosophy. Okay. Criterion is a fundamental method of empirical sciences. He held that genuinely scientific theories are never finally confirmed. Well, that doesn't even make any sense. I mean, they're confirmed by the volume of evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. That is, you have a theory that better fits the evidence and hopefully better fits it in a dramatic way, like evolution. Okay, because deconfirming observations that are inconsistent with the empirical predictions of the theory are always possible, no matter how many confirming observations have been made. So again, this argument that non-confirming ones just poof into existence, that somehow you're guaranteed to find the flaw in the invisible man theory, I don't think you'll find a flaw in it. So if I propose that there's invisible aliens and they're making everything happen, they're pushing everything, they're smacking everything together, they have ray guns, all kinds of... I mean, there's no flaw in the theory, shithead. There's not gonna be some flaw arising from somewhere, because I've escaped all evidence. I've escaped having to produce any evidence. So Poplar was an idiot. Scientific theories are instead incrementally collaborated through the absence of deconfirming evidence. So again, in the case of every one of these bold claims, gravity bends light twice as much, unconfirmed. Just every bit of what they are arguing essentially is hard. Not even it's not even like you have to unconfirm it. They still haven't even demonstrated it with a reasonable amount of evidence. So incrementally collaborated through the absence of deconforming evidence in a number of well-designed experiments. So these are all well-designed experiments. The fake detector experiments that they claim where they claim, oh yeah, well if I cover one of the slits and there's only one slit left, there's no pattern. When their own theory says there has to be a pattern. They call it a beam splitter when actually it's not creating two equal beams. By their own theory, it can't possibly create two equal beams. Not even possible by their own theory. And they'll sit there and claim it's two equal beams. I mean, they're so full of shit. Alright, anyway. Scientifics are never fully confirmed. We already did that. Because deconfirming observations are inconsistent with the empirical predictions of the theory. Well, again, their prediction is that there should be no waves in the single slit experiment with light. That's what water says, no waves. their prediction is in the multi-slit experiment, images shouldn't end up at the locations because it's randomized and you can't preserve an image with a random event. Anyway, are always possible no matter how many confirming observations have been made. Scientific theories are, and so okay, we did that. All right. According to Poplar, some disciplines that have claimed scientific validity, astrology. Well, I'd say that's what cosmology is, right? Because they're making so many claims they haven't verified with evidence. Metaphysics, Marxism, and psychoanalysis. So apparently Poplar had problems with these things. He's saying that psychoanalysis doesn't work. I think it's proven itself over time that it does. You can unravel a person's where they went wrong. You can take them back and go back to where the things went wrong, and you can sort of try to fix them. But anyway, are not empirical sciences because their subject matter cannot be falsified in this manner. I don't even, psychoanalysis isn't a theory, it's a frickin' therapy. But regardless, at Marxism, so somehow he has proven Marx wrong about the failures of capitalism. I mean, the fact that the exploitation can't evolve. I mean, once you've maximized exploitation, you can't go anywhere from totally exploited. You can't, there's no like double slavery. So Marx was wrong about that. No, he was right about that. Oh, God. Yeah, fuck you and your Poplar. Fuck you. Jake. Fake. Jake the fake. Alright, so more of the same. Same idiot. So they don't have the integrity to have one kind of spam account. Just say, I'm trying to make an argument 1. And then they could have, I'm trying to make an argument 2. And they could just label their fake account so it's the same faker. Okay, who expects to be able to be totally rude, and I'm not allowed to do the same to him. I'm not allowed to spill my, puke on his videos. The falsifiability fallacy occurs when someone makes a claim that is impossible to prove false. So again, all the claims I've made are not impossible to prove false. You could just prove what evidence there is, what experiments demonstrate it can't possibly be. That's all you do. I've explained polarization. Where have you done it? Again, why don't you link me to the better explanation of magnetism? So link me to the best video you know of on Earth of how a magnet works. And I'll demonstrate just how silly and preposterous and nonsensical it is as a theory. It doesn't say a damn thing about how a magnet works. Where I've demonstrated how my theory fits and explains why magnets are magnets. And I've explained why there is gravity and all of that. And you're not debunking any of it. You're not demonstrating any inconsistency with the evidence. You're just playing little word games. Because that's all you have as an argument. You haven't answered any of my questions. And you haven't met the challenge to just keep posting me links to the brilliant experiments that prove me wrong. Because you don't have any brilliant experiments that prove me wrong. Okay, makes a claim that is impossible to prove false. Falsifiability, the ability to be falsified or proven wrong. So again, this whole notion of falsifiability is just bullshit. It's just a cop-out. Your obligation is always to make the argument, to point out the evidence, describe it, and say, this is why this makes sense. Again, I point out why Jesus as a theory doesn't make sense. I can just point out, well, he had these apostles or disciples that witnessed him raising the dead. Okay, they saw him do it. They saw him walk on water. They saw him turn bread and fish and feed millions of people and all these. They saw these miracles performed. And yet it's plausible for us to believe that when push comes to shove, they are going to deny, Jesus. They're going to sit there right in the front of having this fucking guy prove he's the hand of God. He's already proven it to them. They've witnessed it. And we're supposed to believe it's plausible to say, no, he's not really God. That's That's plausible. It's plausible that Moses did all this stuff. He rained frogs from the air. He caught everything on fire. Did all this fucking bullshit, right? And then he parts the sea and does all this shit. And a few years later, all the people are building golden idols again and wanting to go back to Egypt. We're supposed to believe that's plausible? No, that's silly. Fucking silly as a premise. As a story, it's just as bad as three bears with hats and cigars and eyeglasses. Just as bad. So it's falsifiable. It's logically inconsistent. It doesn't make any sense. And as I've clearly just stated, their theory is silly. It's not just incoherent. It's fucking silly as a theory. As a scientific theory, it's fucking silly. All this, a photon is doing all of this, plus it's doing ESP. It's not only got radar, and it's making new universes, and it's doing all kinds of incredible things, but it's also got freaking psycho powers. And can feel what its twin is doing. I mean, what a pile of crap. Laughable crap. All right. The ability to falsify it or proven wrong. So again, it's right there for you to do, and you're saying, I can't prove you wrong. Why not? Why don't you just show some experiments that prove it can't be that way? Magnets can't work because of its external pressure that comes in and the magnet just filters it. That's not an explanation for why there's no energy consumed in magnetism. That's why, you're saying that two magnets run into each other or run away from each other, and you give me no explanation for where the energy came from. You're just saying it just does. Okay, this doesn't get lighter and this doesn't get lighter. Nothing has to burn any energy. There's no source of energy for all the movement you can create in a motor, for example, but they have no explanation for the energy. They don't know where it comes from. They have no place because they don't think the universe is pushing, right? There's no source of the energy. I'm saying the simple thing. Magnets are just filters. They don't do anything. They don't make any energy. They just filter energy. And by filtering it, you intensify it. By segregating it, you make it more. By segregating this from that, okay, then you can do a lot more work. If you're always walking around doing this, you can't do any work. But if you can segregate this from that, then you can do lots of work that way, and you can do lots of work that way, because you've created the imbalance necessary. Anyway, it's considered the key criterion in determining a hypothesis scientific. Conspiracy theories often rely on unfalsifiable claims. No, again, more unrealistic claims. They claim every single person that's ever worked on any satellite technology or at NASA or any of these places, every single one of them is a liar. It's a preposterous theory. Millions of people are lying about the fact that we never really put a satellite in space and took pictures of anything. All the people at the Weather Channel, all the people everywhere, they're all liars. It's a preposterous theory right on its face. Right there, you're already done. The CIA wasted its time putting a bunch of plastic explosives in building number 12 or whatever. A silly theory. Not one of them had a cell phone and took a picture of it. Hey, look what I'm doing. Hey, Ma, look at the job I have. I'm blowing up buildings and stuff. It's really cool. Yeah, not one of them. Everybody's caught up in the conspiracy. Not one of them thinks, oh, this is really wrong, me lying to the whole world. I shouldn't be a liar. Not one of them has a moment. Not one of them finds Jesus and decides to take their cell phone pictures and give them to the Inquirer. Not one. No, that's a preposterous theory. All right. Anyway, so it can be falsified because it's totally inconsistent with any knowledge we have of how reality really works. Okay, defends the theory despite the fact that the facts that disprove it. Okay, let's see. Conspiracy theories often rely on untestable claims, unfalsifiable claims, in which the theorist ardently defends a theory despite any facts that disprove it. Well, that's completely falsifiable then, right? I mean, the fact that they keep denying that they've been provided an explanation, like the videotape of the building falling down. It's already been explained. You can see that the inside of the building fell down way before the facade, right? Because all the air went shooting out all the windows. So the inside of the building clearly fell down way before the facade just went, eh. You know, two different events over a period of time. Anyway, explained. And the fact that they keep pretending it was never explained is just, that's part of their lying now. Now they're just lying. So obviously liars should have no credibility. And you're effectively a liar, and you should have no credibility. All right. Despite the facts that to prove it suggest only, well, it's a conspiracy. It's impossible to disprove. So once again, there's no evidence that I'm doing anything like that. So again, just more false accusations being made by fake and phony douchebags who don't have any better argument to make. Once the criterion of falsifiability, it is important to examine a statement or theory more critically. They all should be examined critically. You don't want any critical examination. Again, you can't answer my simple questions of the inconsistencies in the slit experiment. Why doesn't the math predict the difference in the photon experiment very, very clearly bar-like pattern? The pattern in the interferometer, do you see any gradual on and off in that pattern at all? Now, doesn't your mathematics predict it should be gradually on and off? I mean, is that true or false? Does the mathematics predict it or not? Okay, the defense of the horoscopes not only involve okay, so why am I going to bother with this? I'm not doing horoscopes. I'm not saying there's any special magical forces. I'm giving you explicit definition of exactly why something moves. I'm not just saying, oh, it moves because it felt like it. There's nothing like that in anything I'm saying. It's in what you're saying, shithead. So you're such a liar to imply that there's some astrological woo in my theory when there's absolutely none. That's exactly the difference between my theory and your theory. Your theory is completely woo. Magic forces all over the place, magic energy from nowhere. Gravity's just magical energy. They don't explain where the energy comes from. Why does the moon move towards the earth? What force, what thing happens? The electrons and the protons are sitting there in the moon. What is telling them they have to go somewhere? How are they told? How do they do it? What propellers run? What jet engines do it? What fucking mechanical mechanism compels the electron to move from here to here? You have no explanation at all. Yours is astrology. Yours is magic. All right. So again, they just keep harping on the same unfalsifiability, also known as untestability, description. Confidently asserting, so it's exactly what you're doing. You're confidently asserting you've got the right answer, that this wave particle duality, magical space bending, all of that's the right answer. And it's completely vacuous. Okay, and you are confident yours can be the only right answer. Okay, that a theory or hypothesis is true or false, even though the theory or hypothesis cannot possibly be contradicted. So there's no, it can't possibly be. Go ahead and prove photons are bent twice as much as all other matter in the universe. Go ahead and prove that. And I'll call that a rather significant fact. If you can prove that, I'll say, yes, that does knock some of my wind out of my sails, because it will make no coherent sense. I'll say, yes, the universe is incoherent and fucked up. All right? But you're never going to prove it. By an observation or the outcome of a physical experiment. So again, argue the experiments. Show me your experiments. And you have to do better than show me LIGO. Because I'm just going to keep pointing out how every claim you're making about LIGO is completely untestable and undemonstrated by any evidence. You've never shown matter converting into bent space, certainly. You certainly haven't explained how, if your mirror can't measure half the distance of a proton, that is, you can't shoot light into a mirror and expect it to hit the same atom at the same location. How can you measure half the distance of a proton with a ruler that's already hundreds of atoms incoherent, randomized? How is that possible? Why don't you just explain to me how it's possible? All right. A theory hypothesis cannot possibly be contradicted by an observation or outcome of any physical. Okay, usually without strong evidence or good reason. So again, just jargon, just cop-outs. You're afraid of the argument. Okay, falsifiability arguments are just for cowards. Okay, you can't explain why your theory is superior. You can't explain how you have superior evidence. You can't do any of that. So you just cop out with some kind of, I'm just going to call you falsifiable, even though you could throw exactly the same claims right back at me. Yours is just as unfalsifiable. Your bent space claim, your magictons, your fucking bent space, dark matter, dark energy, invisible things that produce only one thing, the thing we need to fix our math. And you don't think that's an unfalsifiable claim? God, you're amazing. You're fucking lying pieces of crap. All right. So unfalsifiable garbage again. It's the claim of the weak. When you have a weak argument, you resort to, well, it's unfalsifiable. Again, you can make arguments against unfalsifiable claims quite easily. Religion is easily debunked by the inconsistencies of the book even. Why can't God write a good book? Okay, a really clear instruction manual. Why does he have a problem articulating the principles? Why did, if Moses got his laws from the burning bush or the lightning mountain, from God, why did Jesus rewrite them? That doesn't make any sense. Why did Jesus say Moses was wrong to allow you to divorce your wife? Why did Jesus bother saying that? If Moses was getting his laws from God, so what, God changed his mind? It doesn't make any sense. So you can point out the inconsistencies. There's only about 1 million of them in the silly, stupid stories. 1 minute, kill everybody. Next minute, love everybody. I mean, it's just too stupid. And you can't man up. Instead, you have to cop out with, it's unfalsifiable. Yes, so is your theory, shit for brain. Oh, God, you're just so... People are just so fucking dumb and insincere and scuzzy. Alright, seems they can't understand unfalsifiability. That is, this is a real reality. Thanks for simplifying these basic functons with us mortals. I don't even know what that means. What is unified theory? So he can't understand that somebody put two words right next to each other. Can't even figure out that. But obviously this is really poorly written, so it just opens the door to more poorly written crap, so we'll just delete it. Don't know the intent, but it's quite useless. Alright, so then you probably never understand it, and then Zohar responds. I won't bother with this. I mean, you really shouldn't get in conversation with the trolls. Have you ever heard something called the naturalistic philosophy? The concept was introduced by E.G. Moore in his Ethica Principia. Yeah, I'm really excited. Within he argues that any system of morality cannot be derived from a description of facts, which is just so silly. So again, I know it's a fact because I'm conscious that there's a huge difference, value difference, okay, good, bad difference, between me having a nail in my eye and me having a cupcake. I know there's a gigantic difference. You just can't describe how cavernous the difference is between those two events. One good, one bad. One do again, one don't ever do again. Now, that's a fact. I'm sorry, it's a fact from my perspective. It's proven. I'm conscious. It's happening to me right here inside of me. I know of the value difference between good feelings and bad feelings. I know it. There's no... You can tell me, oh, you just don't understand. You're being fooled. Okay? The unpleasant events aren't really unpleasant. Pain isn't really bad. It's fun. No, you really can't make that as a rational argument. So there's no disputing it. So if you're not going to give me that, if you're not going to just concede that, okay, maybe your consciousness, it doesn't matter. Those two things are the same thing. Not in my consciousness. So I'm just saying, you're full of shit if you're telling me they're the same thing. That I can't see any value difference between those two events. And those are facts. It's a fact that I'm conscious. It's a fact my consciousness manifests these two fundamentally different value circumstances of really bad and really good. And the only other fact I need is to understand that, well, unlike you, I believe the other consciousnesses are doing what I'm doing. I don't think they're doing this. I can't tell the difference between a cupcake and a nail in my eye. I think most of them can tell the difference. And it's just as dramatic a difference for them, too. They really don't want people shoving nails in their eyes. And they really do want cupcakes at a reasonable price. That's really the way it works. That's the way the world really works. So all of them are also doing the same thing I'm doing. Same values involved. And so I already have all the ingredients for morality and ethics. And just understanding that, well, I don't want to make nail in the eye, and I want to make cupcakes. And whatever I do in the world, I want to try to have more cupcake making than nail in the eye making. And now I have all the values and morality, and the landscape is full and complete. So you horseshit nihilists are retarded little selfish fucks. I don't know why the human race really should pass a law against it. It's so fucking stupid. To deny the existence of pain and pleasure as realities in our world is just so fucking stupid. You can't even, there's no description of getting that wrong. I mean, it's the ABC blocks of life, and you can't even get A, B, C right. I mean, you really just should be shot. I can't, there's no other, the only solution is you should just be a grease spot. You're just so fucking stupid. All right. Enough said to that retard. All right. Let's see. Catch up. Thank you. Okay. Hi again. Ken, Applied Science has a nice playlist. Okay, so yeah, the electron microscope. So yeah, there really are good videos. But the key thing that I was arguing is it doesn't have an explanation of the lensing thing, right? So I think it's working on the same principle as the interferometer, to tell you the truth. So I think this is all kind of a huge... so anyway, so it doesn't really answer the important question. So the idea is the real length of a electron microscope is made out of this idea that they're trying to make a little tiny point of electron beam, just the thinnest possible. And the catch is the beam spreads because the electrons hate each other, right? They really don't like each other, in theory, if they were electrons. But even if they were light, they would diffract going through a little hole. So you put the beam, you have a little hole to start the process. And the little hole is going to end up doing this, even if it was light, even if these were X-rays coming out of here, they would spread. And if they were electrons, they would theoretically spread because electrons would run away from each other. So they'd want to spread. And so what they do is, I think all they do is they just put another little hole here. Okay, they say, well, which ones went through the center of this hole? And then we're still going straight. And then they'll go through the center of this hole. And so so they don't want these reflected ones to be able to get through either. So the longer they make the container, I suppose that might have something to do with how many sideways bits will get in through the hole, but I'm not quite sure of that. Well, anyway, they make another hole, okay, and they allow it to spread again, and then they have another little hole. And so what they're basically doing is just saying, I just want the bits of energy that go right through the center of all these holes, because then I'll know the beam has got a bunch of parallel energy in it. So the only way I can know I have a little tiny beam that's all parallel is I have to create a bunch of obstacle courses to get everybody else knocked the hell out. So anybody who's a little bit off, any light that was going a little bit off, when it gets to this next hole, it'll deflect. And so I'm only going to get the ones going right through the center, so I know they're moving really straight. So I'm just trying to get this straight line. So there is no lens. There's just the pinhole lens. They're just using the small aperture as a lens. And just like the interferometer, I was sort of pointed out that the end result of having the uneven beams through the beam splitter is that one of the beams diverges through the whole process, which means the only light you're ever going to use from it might only be 10% of the light, but it's going to be culminated. It's going to be light that is going very straight versus the light that, most of the photons, which diverged through the whole section. and the other one's just going to diverge this last little bit. So you're going to be mixing light diverging a little bit with light going very straight. Pieces of light, actually. But anyway, so if anybody has a link to something explaining that part. So of all the videos this guy made about the electron microscope, there was none about that part. That's the part I think that's the theory is a little fudgy. So, but anyway, thanks for the links. But yeah, if you have a better link to the function of the lenses, as they call them, for the electrons, because I don't think they're lenses, you know, in any real sense of the word lens. They don't manipulate the electrons. They just isolate them. They just eliminate the non-compliant. So, you know, lenses bend things. They don't bend any electrons to make the beam. They just filter the beam out of the stream. As far as I can tell, that's all that's actually happening. So again, it doesn't provide the thing I'm looking for is the real manipulation of things that are actually called electrons. Yeah. But anyway, it's always this medium problem, right? As soon as you put a medium in, even a TV tube, there's a gas in there. As soon as you put a gas in there, then you can be pushing atoms. You're not necessarily just pushing electrons or moving electrons. And the thing that's really moving them is the force. So again, my argument is that whatever's moving, the real key is that these things are creating a bunch of X-rays, and that the X-rays are what's actually pushing the thing. The thing isn't moving on its own. It's being pushed by an X-ray. And as it goes faster and faster and faster, it takes longer and longer and longer for the X-ray to push into the thing and push it along. So that's why there's time dilation for mu mesons and all that kind of crap, is because the faster they go, the longer it takes the beam to go through them. Something's moving very fast in front of you, it's hard to push it. Okay, so if you're throwing things to push it, the things take a longer time to catch up to it and then hit it, and longer time to catch up to it and hit it. So the beam takes a long time to get through something that's moving very fast. All right. So this was more by the stuff I just deleted because it's just too rude. You claim your website that your theory is compatible with modern physics. So again, this is the second time this claim's been made. It was made by that lying scum, whatever's superhumour dunce. It's not that hard to read. There's stuff written on there. There's no statement on my website that I'm compatible with their theory. It's not compatible with their theory. It's compatible with the evidence. So you can't state the claim correctly? Amazing. The author sincerely has no bad faith knowledge of any existing proven facts of mathematics or conceptual vision destructive to the viability of this theoretical perspective. So I'm just plainly stating there's no math, there's no conceptual vision, whatever, that you can state as an argument of the evidence, a way of conceiving the evidence place in the organization of thing, where you could argue that there's evidence against the theory. I'm saying there's no evidence against the theory that I'm aware of. No one's pointed me to such an experiment my theory can't explain. In fact, it has been the author's experience that this new model easily conforms to existing science. Okay, and by science I mean experiments. I don't mean existing science like existing theories. Dense space. It's clearly a counter argument to that. So I guess I could write that better. So I will. But I mean, I do not say it's compatible with modern physics, because it's clearly not. I don't believe LIGO detected gravity waves. I don't believe photons are twice as bent by gravity. I don't believe photons are entangled. So my question is this: can you name an experiment such that, let me get this out of the way, if the results of the experiment had turned out different, would invalidate your theory? So I don't even know how that makes any sense. But yes, again, if you prove photons are bent, twice as much by gravity, that they're even bent by gravity, you'll take a shot out of my theory because it doesn't make any sense. Forces don't affect forces. If not, what experiment would you propose to test your theory that has not been done? So I've already been over that, so no need to go over it again. Just do the radar experiment to disprove your theory. Okay, do the radar experiment where you put the antenna here in the middle, the receiver. You put 2 radar dishes on this side, doing the same signal, and then just move your antenna closer to one and further away, and you'll get an interference pattern. Now, clearly, the radar beams can't possibly be interfering with each other, right? You can't make the argument that they're traveling through space and they're destructively interfering or any of that crap. So they're interfering in the antenna on the receiver. And I would argue that that's not your theory. Okay, your theory isn't that the interference happens when it lands. Your theory is the interference happens in the space going to the landing zone, not that So, and my jamming argument clearly would explain the phenomenon. So, so do that experiment, and it'll demonstrate I'm right and you're wrong. Okay, the radar experiment is not an experiment proving or demonstrating that radar signal waves are interfering in space. It'll prove exactly the opposite. If not, what experiment? Okay, I'll read that. Also, here's logicallyfallacious.com's definition of unfalsifiable. So again, more of the same crap. Confidently asserting exactly what you're doing. You're confidently asserting bent space did it. You're confidently asserting the virtual photon, the non-existent, non-described thing with no energy to even provide for the existence of this virtual photon. That's why you're calling it a virtual photon, is because you can't explain where it came from. Your theory doesn't even explain where the energy comes from, for fuck's sake. And then you have all the other dark matter, entanglement, all the other nonsense. You know, completely made up, invisible man bullshit. Asserting that a theory or hypothesis is true or false, even though the theory or hypothesis cannot possibly be contradicted by observation or the outcome of physical experiment. Well, again, I'm not the one asserting that there's no experiments can glean out these truths. You're the one doing that. You claim you did experiments you never did, like the detector experiment and the slit experiments. You claim your mathematics is correct when obviously you can't use the same equation for electrons and protons. You get clearly different results. It's clearly not the same pattern. One is gradually on and off. One is blocks of light and dark. So you're full of shit on the face. Yours is the evidence that sucks. Okay, usually without strong evidence or good reason. So again, just keep doing the same thing. Come on, can you do better than that? What about the delayed quantum eraser experiment? So here's one relying on polarization again. They don't even understand what polarization is. They don't know how a polarizing filter works. And they have this tiny difference in outcomes. So like the predicted outcome would be 75% of something would happen. 75% chance. And what they observe in the experiment is like an 85% chance. Okay, and so they've decided that means they've proven, okay, that there can't be a variable like a right-hand glove and a left-hand glove. And it's all based on, again, this idea, first the assumption that they have a little magical crystal that creates 2 photons at exactly the same moment going in exactly opposite directions. So that's the first assumption. Like, they never prove there's any such thing. Like, one doesn't happen first and one happens second. They didn't disprove any of that. So, and then we have these assumptions that now these 2 things are entangled, okay, and now we're going to put them through polarizers, and it's this whole complex experiment. So he says that should convince you, all right, this convoluted, complex experiment based on a bunch of assumptions about a function they don't even understand, polarization. They can't even give you a rational explanation for why, you have 2 filters blocking each other, and you put one in between them and you create more light. They don't even have a rational explanation for the phenomena that exists, that we know exists. So anyway, what a pile of crap. Okay, that would literally make Gary's head explode. Well, whatever. What makes my head explode is this obligation I have to sit there and have reverence for your your interpretations. Oh, we've proven there's multiverses. Oh, we've proven photons have radar. I mean, you would talk as if you understand any of this stuff, and you don't. So go ahead, explain to me how you proved the 2 photons are entangled or that they've been produced at the same time. Show me that you've even proven that. Okay. You do realize this guy wants us to return to a pre-Einstein, post-Newton model of physics. No, they didn't have a model of physics then. Okay, what they had was integrity as scientists. That is, they didn't sit there and claim to know what they didn't know. Newton didn't explain Newton's rings because he didn't know what was causing it. He didn't tell you what mechanism made gravity happen. He told you what it does. So science had integrity then, and then it lost all its integrity because people like Young show up and do absolutely nothing new, and everybody says, wow, look how well we've changed the world, the Young experiment. No, Newton already did them all. Right, how is this guy a new Einstein if he literally wants physics to go back to a pre-Einstein model? So they're just using the term Einstein as the generic placeholder for brilliant innovator. Obviously, yes, by my own words, Einstein was the fake. He was a faux, okay, revolutionary. He did a faux job, okay, he was a fake, okay, it's not the real deal. Also, his particle theory of gravity was considered by some of the greatest physicists in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. Why don't you show me the 19th century even critiques? And I'll point out how, well, yeah, it's a critique based on knowing nothing about how atoms work. So they didn't know it was a nuclear force back then. And so again, what's the argument? Again, I've already countered all these arguments. The fact is, it was a valid premise to start with, that the energy comes from the outside. It explains where the energy comes from, which is more than your theory does. All right, and was rejected long before Einstein, and rejected for what good reason? Okay, I mean, I've explained all the reasons why they mean nothing. Okay, gravity doesn't, I don't make gravity as I'm falling into gravity. Okay, the gravity I fall into is already existing. It already existed as a deficit in the field. I don't need to show up to make the deficit. I just add to the deficit something else will fall into. Okay, I get pancaked on the earth and something that was traveling with me, oh yeah, well, he's going to have gravity more because I'm part of the earth now and I'm going to create more gravity for him to fall into. All right, for instance, if a particle bombardment was responsible for all pull gravity, so again, this pull, there's no pull gravity. It's just an amazingly silly statement. Obviously, it's a push. Those same particles would slow a planet up in its orbit over time. So again, I've already argued the drag argument. There's lots of mechanisms you can imagine where drag doesn't become an issue. So I did the simple box analogy. You throw energy into the box, and if you have a frictionless box, the energy moves back and forth, as you create more momentum so as it moves this way in a go, stop, go manner, because of the motion, the more energy you push it into, the smaller the box becomes, and now the more energy is in the box to go even faster against the flow. So the more force applied against the box, the more the box tightens, which increases the amount of energy, the cycling time, and so the box meets the opposing force it creates by moving. Now you can have an extra force and slow it down, but if you're just creating the extra force created by its own motion, it automatically compensates for that by just shortening the box. So there, drag fixed. But you don't want to think about anything. You don't. Feynman didn't want to think about it. He clearly copped out. He basically said, well, we don't have an answer. You don't like it? Tough. He said it overtly. Just do your math, okay? Don't try to conceptually understand anything. It's ridiculous. He basically said, it's ridiculous, so don't think about it. You'll hurt yourself. And so you're just the one copped out. So you see a problem, and you say, there can't be a solution. There's no possible way to explain it. There's no possible way to make any mechanism that can overcome drag. And you already know that electrons and protons appear to be affected by drag, because how come we can't shoot them anywhere? How come we can't make them go any amount of large distance, okay, and maintain their momentum without hitting them again? So you have no proof of your bullshit, and you're so obnoxious in saying that, oh, it was proven wrong. No, it wasn't proven impossible. It wasn't any of that. You just gave up. All right, it was rejected. So again, rejected for stupid reasons that I've already counter-argued. They're in the playlist, blah, 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 blah. All right, for instance, if, okay, we already did that. And eventually the planets would collapse into the sun. So again, based on your assumptions about how matter moves. So you don't even know how it moves. You don't even know a mechanism for why the electrons and protons are moving. And yet you're going to tell somebody else how it's impossible to overcome drag. It's impossible for material objects to create a mechanism that defeats drag. You didn't prove it. All right. If that's your new Einstein, God bless you. So that's another God botherer, I guess. The right-hand rule, really. Do you think he explains anything? So I clearly did explain that the right-hand rule only exists because of the fact that there's the motor force. It's only relevant to the fact that you can take energy moving in two dimensions, okay, going this way, and then some other current moving in this direction, and what will happen is the energy will actually leave in the third dimension. So so you're just basically saying when you have two intersecting bits of energy, that they will move into the third dimension. They'll move the energy that way. So you're just, it's really the fact that up and down, okay, and right and left to this line are obviously all the same kind of turn. It takes as much work to turn right, in theory, in space, as it does to turn up. Okay, and these are two separate dimensions. This is one dimension going this way. This is another dimension, two, going this way. And this is the third dimension going this way. And it's easy to see that one of the dimensions is always, two of the dimensions are always in a plane, and that plane can be understood that it's just as much work to go left as it is up when there's no gravity. Right? Same difference. If you don't think gravity matters in terms of it's not going to be affecting the force. So the force doesn't care. Left turn, up turn, same difference. So it has those 360 degrees of freedom of motion. It can go more than just left and right. It can go up and down. So anyway, so the interpretation is the current automatically obligates when there's a north field, it goes up. When there's a south field, it goes down. And obviously, if you change the point of view from right to left, obviously from the left side, up is going to be one way. From the right side, up is the opposite way. Blah, 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 blah. So anyway, I already explained it. So you're just lying. You're just ignoring what was clearly already explained. Okay, right-hand rule. It's similar to labeling clockwise motion and counterclockwise motion in terms of clockwise and counterclockwise. It really isn't. Okay, the real right-hand rules always really have to do with, this goes one way, this goes another way, and then this finger points to the other way. So the right-hand rule has to do with 3 dimensions, not 2. It's vectors. They actually call them, put the little hat on them. Okay, to recognize, what do you call that? Cross products. They're cross products. Dumbass. The cross products happen in the X, Y, and Z dimension. So it's not just about left and right. It's always going to be interpreted as left and right when you're making a 2-dimensional circuit or some other 2-dimensional object. You're only going to worry about the left and right parts because the third dimension is irrelevant to the function of the piece of metal or whatever you have in only 2 dimensions. But it's always a 3-dimensional function. Shit for brain. All right, in terms of okay, left and right hand rule, as long as we consistently apply it in each circumstance, but none of this matters since Gary 1 doesn't know what the right hand rule is. Right hand rule of magnetism is. Well, that's a lie. The most since 2 it it's moot since, according to his website, everything that conventional physics says happens does happen, so that's a lie. It's just that it all happens because of Twan's tip-tap, just useless. This is obviously the cowboy calling himself David Hilbert. So, but again, he doesn't do the cause any good. I'm just saying, so I think to a rational person, they would know that, well, this is a pathetically bad argument. False premises, word games, not even close to answering a single one of the arguments I've made about the fallibilities, the flaws in their physics. Nothing. I mean, it's just such a pussy argument. So anyway, enough of the crap. So, but that's all you get so far. That's the best the physicists can do. The physics lovers of the internet, this is the best they can do in terms of making arguments. They can't show up with one solid argument from integrity and real science. They need this asshole. This is the best they can do, again. So if I was a flat earther, they would be losing the argument, right? Pretty decisively losing. This is what they have to resort to. Pathetic mischaracterizations. Lies. Cheating. And such.